Betrayal doesn't always explode into your life like a bomb. Sometimes it enters quietly, like a shadow slipping under a door. You don't hear it. You don't feel it, not until it's already sitting inside your chest, tightening its grip around everything you thought was safe. That's exactly how my story began. No warnings, no obvious signs, just a slow shift in the world around me, so subtle that I didn't notice until it was too late. But you're not here for the beginning. You're here for the revenge, the slow burn, the psychological war that unfolded piece by piece. And trust me, if you've ever been betrayed, ignored, or replaced, you're going to feel every second of what I'm about to tell you. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the twists in this story, you don't want to miss a single one. Now, let's start from the moment everything seemed perfect right before it all fell apart. My name is Ryan, and for most of my life, I believed in one simple rule: treat people the way you want to be treated. I didn't grow up with much, but I had values: respect, loyalty, and honesty. Maybe that's why I expected the same from others. Maybe that was naive. I wasn't famous, rich, or extraordinary. I was just a regular guy working hard to build something stable, a job I liked, a home I cared about, and a small circle of people I trusted. Life wasn't perfect, but it was steady. And sometimes steady feels like paradise. When I got promoted at work, everything changed. The role demanded more from me: longer hours, higher pressure, but I handled it. Not because I was forced to, but because I wanted to. I felt proud of myself. That pride blinded me. I didn't notice how my absence created a silence in my own home. I didn't notice how someone else started filling the space I left behind. For months, I thought everything was normal. I'd leave early, come home late, eat whatever was left over, and crash into bed. But little things kept happening. Things I brushed off because I trusted the wrong person too much. It started with the mood swings. One day warm, the next day distant. One day laughing, the next day cold and dismissive. I blamed stress. I blamed my schedule. I blamed anything except the truth. Then came the secrets. Locked phone, whispered calls. I'll tell you later. You wouldn't understand. I didn't push. I didn't question. I didn't want to be that guy. But trust doesn't die all at once. It dies in fragments. One night I still remember the exact date, the exact smell of rain in the air, the exact weight in my chest. I returned home earlier than expected. I had finished a project ahead of schedule, and for the first time in months, I felt free. I wanted to surprise them. Maybe we'd watch something together, talk, reconnect, something we hadn't done in weeks. The front door opened with a soft click, and the house was dark except for a faint glow from the living room. A strange, uneasy silence filled the air. You know that feeling when your body senses something before your mind understands it? That's exactly what happened to me. I walked slowly, quietly, and then I heard it. Whispers, sharp, urgent, panicked. Two voices, one familiar, one I had never heard before inside my home. And then I heard my name. Not lovingly, not kindly, but like I was a problem, a joke, an obstacle. I leaned closer, and my stomach twisted as their words cut through me. Don't worry, he won't find out. He's too busy with work to notice anything. A cold chill ran down my spine. My heart wasn't beating, it was pounding, hard, violent, like it wanted to break out of my chest. I stayed frozen behind the wall, listening, Each sentence felt like another crack in my ribs. He's so predictable. He trusts too easily. He won't see anything coming. I wanted to walk in. I wanted to confront them. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My whole world narrowed to the sound of their voices, mocking me, planning something against me. And I realized in that moment, this wasn't new. This was rehearsed, practiced, ongoing. My hands started shaking. My throat tightened. My mind raced through every red flag I had ignored, every moment I had dismissed, every shift in their behavior. It all made sense now. The puzzle pieces snapped together in one brutal instant. I stepped back quietly. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through water. I slipped out of the house before they knew I was there. Outside, the night felt colder than usual. The streetlights glowed dim and distant. My breath came out uneven. I walked down the road with no destination, just trying to understand the pain burning inside me. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was numb, shocked, confused, and worst of all, I felt stupid for trusting so blindly. That night, sitting alone in my car under the empty sky, I made a decision. Before reacting, before confronting, before accusing, I would gather the truth. Every detail, every message, every lie. If they were orchestrating a betrayal behind my back, then I wanted to know everything. I wanted to see how deep the knife had gone. I wanted to know who else was involved. I wanted to understand how long they had been laughing at my expense. Because once I had the full picture, once I knew the entire truth, there would be no going back. And that was the moment, the exact moment when my story truly began. The betrayal had started, but my revenge was still loading. The night after I overheard their whispers felt like the longest night of my life. I didn't go home until sunrise. I drove around aimlessly, stopping at empty parking lots, deserted streets, and corners of the city I had never noticed before. It's strange how betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your sense of direction. You don't know where to go, who to call, or what to feel. All you know is that the world you trusted a few hours ago no longer exists. When I finally walked through my front door, the house looked the same. But something inside me had changed forever. The sofa, the mug on the counter, the jacket hanging near the door, everything that once felt familiar now felt foreign, almost threatening. Like the walls themselves were holding secrets. They were standing in the kitchen when I entered, pretending everything was normal. They smiled so naturally, so effortlessly, as if they hadn't spent the night plotting behind my back. I forced myself to smile too, though my jaw felt like it was carved from stone. "Early morning?" they asked casually. "Yeah, couldn't sleep," I replied, my voice calm in a way that scared even me. Because deep inside, something cold was forming. Not hatred, not anger, just clarity. For the first time, I wasn't blinded by trust. For the first time, I was watching, and I saw everything. Little details I had ignored for months suddenly stood out like neon signs. Their phone always face down. Sudden late-night work calls. The way they flinched when a certain name popped up in notifications. A new perfume I never asked about. A new routine I was never part of. But confronting them now would be useless. They'd lie. They'd twist the story. They'd gaslight me until I questioned my own sanity. That's how manipulators play the game. They make you doubt yourself before you ever doubt them. So I stayed calm. I played along. And behind the scenes, I started building my plan. That's when I invested my first night in what would become months of gathering truth. I stayed up until almost 4 a.m. scrolling through phone records, work schedules, receipts, bank transactions, anything that could give me a pattern. Anything that could show me who the second voice belonged to. Anything that could confirm the betrayal I felt in my bones. And that's when something clicked. A number appeared repeatedly at odd hours, short calls, long calls. Days I wasn't home. Nights they claimed to be sleeping. I saved the number, ran a quick online trace, and the name that popped up made my heart sink into my stomach. It was someone we both knew. Someone who had been around us. Someone who had smiled at me. Someone I had trusted enough to let into my home. I remember staring at the screen for almost a full minute, my hands trembling. I kept telling myself it could be a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't that serious. Maybe I was overthinking everything. But deep down, I knew better. People don't call each other 30 times a week by accident, especially behind the back of the person they live with. As days passed, I continued observing quietly, and something even stranger started happening. The person who betrayed me began acting nicer, sweeter, more attentive. Like they sensed a shift. Like they were trying to reel me back in before I stumbled upon the truth. Manipulators always play this card. When they sense they're losing control, they start acting perfect. Do you want something to eat? You must be so tired. You've been working too hard. Let's relax. Why now? Why suddenly, after months of coldness? Why only after that night? They thought I was still blind. They thought their charm would pull me back into their web. They thought I was still clueless. But I wasn't, not anymore. One evening, while they were showering, their phone lit up on the counter. A message popped up from the same saved number. My heart hammered as I glanced at it. He's acting normal. Did he suspect anything? My vision blurred for a moment. Rage shot up my spine, but I held myself together. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't unlock it. I didn't react, not yet. Because now I had confirmation. Every doubt was real. Every suspicion was true. Every whisper I heard that night was exactly what I thought it was. But the worst moment came 2 days later. I walked into the living room and saw them smiling, at their phone smiling, in a way they hadn't smiled at me in months. A warm, soft, glowing smile. The kind people make when they're talking to someone who makes them feel alive. When they noticed me standing there, they jumped slightly, their thumb automatically covering the screen. That movement, that tiny, impulsive, reflexive movement, told me everything I needed to know. Not only were they betraying me, they were emotionally invested in someone else. And that hurt more than anything. Because betrayal isn't just cheating. Betrayal is when someone chooses to give the world you built together to someone else. That night, I sat alone in the living room long after they fell asleep. The silence felt different now, not painful, not empty, but motivating. The betrayal had ignited something inside me. Something sharp, focused, controlled. This wasn't going to end with accusations. This wasn't going to end with yelling. This wasn't going to end with me breaking down. No, this was going to end with them realizing they chose the wrong person to play games with. And the truth? I was just getting started. After that night, something inside me shifted permanently. The shock, the betrayal, the anger, all of it coalesced into a quiet, sharp determination. I knew what I had to do, but this wasn't about rage or hasty confrontation. No, this was about strategy, patience, and psychological precision. I needed them to understand exactly what they had done, and more importantly, to feel the consequences without realizing I was the one orchestrating it. The first step was observation. Every movement, every habit, every routine became data for me. I noted the times they checked their phone, the people they texted, even the way they walked into rooms when certain messages arrived. It wasn't just spying, it was understanding the pattern, mapping the betrayal down to the smallest detail. And the more I observed, the more clearly I could see how careless they had been. Every slip, every tiny act of overconfidence, every half-hidden glance, they were all cracks in the armor, and I intended to widen them. I started small, testing boundaries. A casual question here, a passing comment there. Nothing obvious, nothing accusatory. But subtly, I shifted the environment around them, nudging pieces into place. I'd leave things in sight messages accidentally on the table, notes misplaced where they'd notice. Every move was carefully calculated, designed to keep them on edge without exposing myself. I watched the way their confident facade flickered just for a moment when they discovered one of these planted clues. That flicker, that moment of doubt was addictive. Meanwhile, I made sure to remain calm in their presence. I smiled, I laughed, I continued living normally, showing no sign of the storm brewing beneath the surface. I didn't want them to suspect how much I knew, how much I had observed. That was the beauty of it. My silence became a weapon. While they were busy enjoying their perceived victory, thinking I was oblivious, I was preparing the stage for the reckoning they didn't see coming. Then came the emotional pressure. I began to subtly remind them, indirectly, of what they had risked. A conversation about loyalty here, a mention of honesty there. Not confrontational, not obvious, but enough to unsettle them. I wanted them to feel tiny cracks of guilt, tiny pangs of anxiety, all while still believing they were in control. And it worked. I could see it in their eyes, the split-second hesitation, the flicker of doubt that they quickly masked with a forced smile. But the real turning point came when I discovered an opportunity. A simple, ordinary situation that, if handled right, would expose them completely and force a reaction I could control. They had left their phone on the kitchen counter, screen unlocked. While stepping out to grab the mail, I knew exactly what to do. Not to invade, not to steal, but to plant the right evidence where it could be seen. A message composed, a photo subtly placed, a tiny trace that would unravel the illusion they had been carefully building. That night, I executed the first piece of the plan. My hands were steady, my heart calm. There was no thrill-seeking, no malice, just calculated precision. Every step was controlled. And when I left, I knew I had struck a chord. The next morning, I watched as their routine began to unravel. They double-checked messages, retraced steps, looked over their shoulder, and the tension in the air was palpable. I didn't have to say a word. I didn't have to confront them. The uncertainty, the creeping panic, The tiny taste of vulnerability that was my silent revenge starting to take shape. Over the next few weeks, I escalated carefully, adding layers to the plan. I observed, waited, planted subtle cues, and watched as they stumbled, flustered, and panicked. Every action I took was precise, measured, and morally justified in my mind. This wasn't about hurting for the sake of hurting. This was about balance, about making someone realize the gravity of the betrayal they committed. And as all of this was unfolding, something unexpected happened. I began to feel a strange sense of empowerment. The betrayal that had initially left me numb and broken had transformed into clarity and focus. I wasn't acting on pure emotion. I was acting with intelligence, foresight, and control. Every move I made reminded me that the world is not always as cruel as it seems, as long as you understand the rules and play wisely. By now, they were constantly second-guessing themselves. The confidence they once carried, the smug certainty that they were untouchable, was beginning to fracture. I could see the cracks in their behavior, the hesitation, the overcompensation, the micro-expressions of fear that they tried desperately to hide. Every small victory, every subtle hint of doubt that I planted, fed into the final stage of the plan, the payoff. Because that's what this was all about. Not anger, not spite, not rage. It was about delivering justice in a way that they could never deny, a way that would make them face the consequences of their choices. And when the moment finally came, when all the pieces aligned perfectly, the impact would be unforgettable for both of us. The shift in the atmosphere didn't happen instantly. It crept in slowly, like a cold fog rolling through a quiet street at dawn. At first, they tried to pretend nothing was wrong. They smiled the same way, asked the same routine questions, and acted as if their world hadn't been nudged off balance. But I could see it. The smallest tremors of discomfort, the slight shake in their voice when they greeted me, the way their eyes darted toward their phone, every few seconds hoping for reassurance, terrified of exposure, and every passing day tightened the pressure around them. I became an observer in my own house, watching the unraveling like a movie playing in slow motion. The secrets they had hidden so confidently were now turning into shadows that followed them everywhere. I didn't need to raise my voice or demand answers. Silence was enough. Silence was louder than confrontation. Silence forced them to sit with their guilt, their anxiety, and the fear that I knew something they couldn't control. Nights were the most telling. They tossed and turned, waking up with shallow breaths, checking their phone, under the blanket like a teenager hiding, messages from their parents. The glow of the screen illuminated their worried expression, and I saw it every time. That deep panic in their eyes. They wouldn't admit it, but they felt the shift. They felt watched. They felt exposed. And it wasn't paranoia, they were exposed. Not to the world, not to their secret partner, but to me. The one person who could destroy everything with a single sentence. But I didn't, not yet. No, this needed to unfold naturally. They needed to panic. They needed to fear. They needed to feel the consequences long before they saw them. Days passed and their lives began to contradict each other. They'd say one thing in the morning and forget it by evening. They'd give explanations for events I never asked about, clearly rehearsed, clearly over-detailed, clearly desperate to cover tracks I hadn't even mentioned. They were digging themselves deeper without realizing it. And I watched, always watched. The more their confidence cracked, the further the truth surfaced. The second person, yes, the one they'd been hiding, they too had begun to worry. Their messages became shorter, colder, more cautious. No more emojis, no more sweet names, no more lengthy late-night conversations. Just short, clipped text like, "Be careful, don't slip, he might know." Oh, I knew. I knew everything. But I wanted them to suffer under the weight of uncertainty. That was the real revenge. Their own guilt and fear turning into the cage I locked them into. One evening, I walked into the room quietly and found them sitting on the couch, their phone gripped tightly in their hand, staring blankly at the screen. When they saw me, they flinched not physically, but emotionally. Just a split-second break in their composure. And that break was enough to tell me they were unraveling faster than I expected. "Everything okay?" I asked calmly. They swallowed hard. "Yeah, just tired." "Work's been?" "A lot." Work. That was always the excuse. But the trembling hand gave them away. I sat beside them, and the silence that fell between us was heavy. Not the peaceful silence of two people comfortable with each other, but the tense silence of someone waiting for a bomb to go off. They wouldn't look at me. They stared at the floor, at the wall, anywhere but my eyes. That's how guilt behaves. It hides in plain sight. Over the next week, the cracks widened. Their partner in betrayal began pulling back. Calls reduced. Messages shortened. Sometimes no reply at all. And I knew why. I had planted uncertainty so deeply between them that distrust was starting to rot their connection from within. The person they betrayed me with had begun worrying. They'd get dragged into something messy. And manipulators are cowards. They abandon ship the moment they sense danger. Then the inevitable happened. One night, I heard quiet sobbing coming from the living room. At first, I thought they were watching a sad movie. But as I got closer, I realized the sound was too real, too raw. I stepped into the room and found them sitting alone on the sofa, head buried in their hands, shoulders trembling violently. My presence startled them. They wiped their face quickly, trying to pull themselves together. "Sorry," they whispered. "It's nothing. Nothing." The word tasted bitter after everything. Nothing was the reason they stayed up at night. Nothing was the source of their fear. Nothing was the lie they had wrapped their entire life around. I didn't expose them. I didn't confront them. Instead, I sat down and spoke softly. "You know, people don't break like this unless they're carrying something heavy." Their lower lip trembled. They turned away, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm just stressed." Stressed. What a convenient word. It can hide anything: debt, guilt, betrayal, an affair, or the fear that your entire web of lies is falling apart. I let the silence stretch again until it became suffocating. And then, slowly, deliberately, I added, "It's okay." Secrets always find a way out. Their heads snapped up. Eyes widened. Breathing hitched. That single sentence hit harder than any confrontation could have, because for the first time they realized something terrifying. I wasn't blind. I wasn't clueless. I wasn't the quiet, trusting partner they thought they could deceive endlessly. No, I knew. But I didn't clarify what I knew. I didn't specify how much I had discovered. And that ambiguity, that uncertainty, was the real knife, twisting inside their chest. From that moment onward, they became restless. Every phone call was a whisper. Every message was typed with shaking fingers. Every time I entered a room, they hid their screen like a guilty child. It was beautiful. Painful, yes. But beautiful watching the mask they had worn for months, finally beginning to crumble. And in that crumbling, I found my power again. This wasn't the revenge yet. No, the real downfall hadn't even started. But the fear inside them, the fear that I might know everything they carried that like a heavy chain around their neck. And I was just beginning to pull. By the time I reached the office that morning, the entire building felt different like. The air itself was buzzing with something electric, something dangerous. People stood in small groups whispering, eyes flicking toward the conference room where a closed-door meeting was underway. My heart beat faster. I knew what was happening. This was the day everything would settle. The day truth would finally drag every lie into the light. For years I had carried the weight of betrayal, manipulation, humiliation, and injustice. Today, that weight would shift to the people who truly deserved it. I walked toward my desk with calm confidence, even though my pulse was racing. My coworkers kept giving me these strange, stunned looks. One of them, a quiet guy from accounts, leaned toward me and whispered, "Bro, they know everything." Someone gave them a whole file. I simply nodded because what else was there to say? I didn't need to pretend anymore. I didn't need to act oblivious. The storm I had prepared for so long had finally arrived, and I wasn't afraid of getting wet. 20 minutes later, my manager stepped out of the conference room.
不会，我专业跑这条路的，没有别人跑，这条是我的专线，这条路。
什么光啊？
这样调个。
这横着啊？
啊，对，横着。哦，就这样，这边。
His face was pale, his hair looked like he kept running his hands through it, and his voice was shaky as he said, "They're calling you in. He wasn't rude today. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't barking orders. He was terrified." That, more than anything, told me the tables had officially turned. When I walked into the conference room, 3 regional heads sat across the table, their expressions unreadable. The atmosphere was tight, tense, almost suffocating. At the far end sat my manager and his little group, the same people who had lied, schemed, sabotaged, and humiliated me for years, but now they looked like school children caught cheating during an exam. No confidence, no ego, just fear. The regional director adjusted his glasses, looked down at the thick file in front of him, and said, "We have received evidence of misconduct, harassment, intentional sabotage, and unethical behavior within this department." His eyes lifted toward the people who had wronged me, and for the first time, someone in authority saw them clearly, not as high performers, not as loyal employees, but as the manipulators they truly were. The director then turned to me. "You were the victim of these actions, and you did your job professionally despite it. We owe you an apology." Hearing that hit me harder than I expected. I had imagined revenge, justice, exposure, but not an apology. Not recognition, not validation. For years I had questioned myself, wondered if I was overreacting, if I was weak, if I was the problem. But now, every piece of truth was laid out on the table like hard evidence in a courtroom. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the fool. I wasn't imagining it. They were guilty, and everyone knew it. One by one, the directors questioned each member of the group. Watching them stutter, panic, and contradict themselves felt like poetic justice. The same people who once boldly mocked me couldn't form a single coherent sentence today. Their lies were sliding out of their control. Their arrogance was dissolving. Their hierarchy was collapsing. But the moment that hit the hardest, the moment I knew justice had fully arrived, was when the director asked me, "Do you want to pursue formal action against them?" The room froze. Every pair of eyes landed on me. For a second, all the pain of the past flashed through my mind. Every insult, every setup, every stolen opportunity. Every night I went home questioning my worth. But I also remembered something else the day I decided to fight back, not with spite, not with rage, but with truth. I took a slow breath and replied, "I want accountability, not revenge, just fairness moving forward." The director nodded, impressed. My manager and his group looked almost relieved until relieved. The director delivered the next line that shattered whatever hope they had left. "Accountability includes consequences, effective immediately. All 4 of you are suspended pending further investigation." Silence, then shock, then panic. They tried to defend themselves, but the directors shut them down instantly. "We've seen the evidence. Enough." As security escorted them out, the manager passed by me, eyes full of humiliation. He whispered, "You did this." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, you did this to yourself." When the meeting ended, the regional director offered me a new position, a higher role, better salary, and direct reporting under him instead of my old manager. The same department that once tried to bury me was now forced to acknowledge my value. The same people who laughed at me couldn't meet my eyes anymore. Walking out of that conference room felt like stepping into a new life. Not because power shifted, but because I reclaimed everything they tried to take: my dignity, my confidence, my self-respect. Later that evening, I sat alone on my rooftop, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The war was over. Justice was served. And I didn't have to destroy anyone to win. I just had to stand my ground. This wasn't just the end of their games. It was the beginning of my story.